Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know, we love to get our hands dirty in the digital trenches, and this time we're diving into cybersecurity.
Always a hot topic.
Always a hot topic, and never more so than right now.
It seems like every day you hear about another attack, another vulnerability.
Yeah, and you've sent me a whole stack of articles here, breaches, vulnerabilities, and maybe a few glimmers of hope, too. So
A few bright spots.
yeah, well, we'll see about that. Let's dive right in.
That's good.
Okay, let's start with something that probably hit a little close to home for a lot of folks, web hosting. The CyberPanel vulnerabilities, what happened there?
Yeah. So CyberPanel is a popular web hosting control panel, and there were two major vulnerabilities discovered. And these left something like 22,000 servers vulnerable.
Wow.
Yeah, to ransomware attacks.
So you're saying hackers were able to just walk right in and basically hold people's data hostage?
Pretty much. They were able to bypass authentication and inject malicious commands. The result was widespread encryption of files on those servers.
So what happened to those websites? Were they just down?
Well, in many cases, yeah. Thankfully, a decryptor was developed so some victims were able to recover their files. But that's not always the case, right?
So it's not like a guaranteed fix. It's not like, oh, we'll just wait for the decryptor and everything will be fine.
Exactly. And it really highlights why patching, keeping your software up to date is just so important.
Right. So it's not about relying on a fix after the fact. It's about
Right.
preventing that from happening in the first place.
Proactive security.
Okay. Speaking of vulnerable systems, QNAP has been having a rough time lately, too, this popular NAS device maker.
Mm-hmm.
2 zero-day exploits in quick succession. That's got to be setting off alarm bells for anyone who uses those devices.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, QNAP devices are often used for storing large amounts of sensitive data.
Yeah, personal photos, videos, documents.
All that important stuff. And these zero-day exploits, which means that they were unknown and unpatched at the time of discovery, allowed attackers to basically get root access to these devices. You know, it's kind of like giving them the keys to the kingdom, so to speak.
So if someone exploited these vulnerabilities, they could potentially steal all the data that's on that device.
Potentially. Yeah, it's definitely a nightmare scenario for anyone who's using these devices.
What's particularly scary is that these were discovered and exploited at the Punto hacking competition.
Right.
So these weren't just, theoretical risks. These are skilled hackers actively trying to exploit these vulnerabilities.
Yeah, very real threats and very skilled hackers.
So I guess the takeaway here is QNAP has since released patches for these vulnerabilities, but you really got to stay on top of these things.
Yeah, stay vigilant. Keep your devices updated.
Okay. So it's not just about choosing the right tech. It's about keeping it up to date. Always. Okay. Moving on from hardware. Even our browsers, our beloved browsers, they're not immune. The Opera cross-barking vulnerability. I saw that in the stack. What makes this one stand out?
This one was particularly interesting because it targeted something that we often think of as a security enhancer. So it was a vulnerability that allowed malicious extensions to gain access to private APIs in the browser.
So kind of like giving these extensions superpowers within the browser.
Exactly. Superpowers they shouldn't have. So essentially they could do things like capture screenshots, tamper with browser settings, and even hijack user accounts.
So they could steal your passwords.
Yeah, potentially. And it's a really good reminder that the extensions we choose, they can be just as important for our security as the browser itself. We often install them without thinking much about it.
Right. We don't really scrutinize those permissions. We just kind of click, okay.
Exactly.
All right. So we need to be mindful about what we're letting into our digital lives. I mean, moving on from browsers, let's talk about the human element for a minute. That Colorado voting system password blunder, even though it seems like it was contained, I mean, it must have sent shivers down a lot of people's spines. Yeah. Especially with elections coming up.
Yeah. A little concerning accidentally posting voting system passwords online. That's a major lapse in judgment.
Yeah. It doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
Right. Even if it seems like the damage was limited because of the state's multi-layered security.
Okay, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But still.
Still a serious lapse, and it just underlines how important human vigilance is, even in highly secure environments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess it's also a good reminder that security isn't just about technology, it's about people and processes.
Okay. Speaking of human fallibility, let's talk about these fake CAPTCHA scams. This is basically preying on our ingrained habit of just clicking "I'm not a robot." It's very clever, actually. These scams are designed to exploit our tendency to just blindly click through CAPTCHA prompts. So they're disguising malware downloads as these familiar "I'm not a robot" buttons.
So you think you're proving you're human, but you're actually installing malware on your computer.
Exactly. It could be anything from info stealers to botnets.
Okay, so even those seemingly harmless online interactions can be weaponized. So how do we avoid falling for these traps?
Be cautious. Be wary of CAPTCHA prompts that appear on unexpected websites or just seem kind of out of context. Take a moment, scrutinize the website, scrutinize the prompt, look at the URL, and if anything feels off, trust your gut and just navigate away.
Good advice. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit and look at some broader trends here.
Yeah.
One that caught my eye was that report about U.S. county websites. Over half of them vulnerable to spoofing. That seems like a recipe for disaster, especially as we head into election season.
Yeah. It's definitely a concern because spoofing attacks, where they create a fake website that looks like a legitimate one, they're often used to spread disinformation or to fish for sensitive information.
Right.
And the fact that so many county websites are still using non.gov domains makes them very easy targets.
So a voter could think they're on the official county website when they're actually on a malicious site.
It undermines public trust and opens the door to all sorts of mischief, interfering with elections.
Yeah. It's not just about a single website being compromised. It's about the potential impact on our democratic processes.
Exactly.
So it sounds like the solution here is pretty simple. Just migrate those county websites to .gov domains.
Exactly. It can make a big difference.
Okay. Now let's talk about this S&P report, because it's basically saying that a lot of these vulnerabilities that we're seeing, they're not just isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a bigger problem, a lack of focus on vulnerability management at a deeper level.
Yeah. The report highlighted this alarming rise in vulnerability exploitation and basically stressed that just patching individual vulnerabilities isn't enough. Organizations need a more holistic approach to security that includes everything from, risk assessment to incident response.
So you can't just keep plugging holes in a sinking ship. You have to address the underlying structural issues.
Exactly. You have to have that strong foundation.
So what's the takeaway here for organizations?
Be proactive. Don't ignore those known vulnerabilities. Leaving them unpatched is basically like leaving your front door unlocked. It's only a matter of time.
Right. It's not if, it's when. And in the digital world, that someone could be anyone. A lone hacker, a sophisticated nation-state actor.
Exactly. It's a dangerous world out there.
Okay. So we need to up our game when it comes to cybersecurity, both as individuals and as organizations. But let's dig into that a little bit more after the break. We'll be back in a moment.
Sounds good. So where do we start, right? I mean, shoring up our defenses, it can seem overwhelming.
Yeah. It feels like every week there's a new threat, a new vulnerability.
Right. But the good news is that a lot of the most effective security measures, they're actually pretty simple, and they don't require a lot of technical expertise.
Okay. So what's the low-hanging fruit? Where should we start?
Strong passwords. I mean, it sounds basic. We've all heard it a million times. But strong passwords are still your first line of defense for so many accounts.
It's true. And I'll admit, I used to be guilty of reusing the same password for multiple sites. But then I started using a password manager, and it's been a game changer.
Yeah, password managers are fantastic. They generate and store strong, unique passwords for all your accounts, so you don't have to remember, a million different combinations.
Right. And the nice thing is they encrypt your data. So even if your device is compromised, your passwords are still safe.
Exactly.
So password managers, they're not just for techie people. They're actually pretty user-friendly.
Yeah, they've come a long way.
Okay, strong passwords. Check. What's next?
Two-factor authentication, or 2FA. I mean, it's another must-have. It adds an extra layer of security by requiring you to enter a code from your phone or your email along with your password whenever you log in.
Yeah. I've got to admit, sometimes it feels like a hassle.
Right.
Especially when I'm in a hurry and I just want to get into my account.
I know, it can be annoying.
But it's such a small price to pay for that extra peace of mind.
It really is.
Okay, so two-factor authentication. Got it. What else should we be thinking about?
Phishing attacks. They're more sophisticated than ever. These are the scams that trick you into clicking malicious links or opening infected attachments, right? Often by posing as legitimate organizations.
Right. You get an email that looks like it's from your bank or from Amazon or...
Right. Exactly. And they're getting really good at mimicking those legitimate emails.
So how do we avoid falling for these?
Pay close attention to the details. Look for things like misspellings, grammatical errors, anything that just seems a little bit off.
And always double-check that URL.
Absolutely. Make sure it's the actual website before you enter any sensitive information. And if you're ever unsure, contact the organization directly through a known official channel. Don't click on any links in that email.
Good advice. All right. Passwords, two-factor authentication, phishing. It's a lot to keep track of. What about software updates? It feels like I'm constantly being nagged to update something.
And there's a good reason for that. Those software updates, they often include security patches that fix known vulnerabilities. So delaying them is like, leaving your front door wide open.
Right. An invitation for trouble. And that applies to all software, right? Not just our computers and phones, but those smart devices we have around the house, too.
Absolutely. I mean, anything that connects to the internet is a potential target. Your router, your smart TV, your smart refrigerator, if you have one, keep it all updated.
Wow. I never thought about my refrigerator as a potential entry point for hackers.
Well, they're getting smarter, those refrigerators.
That's true. All right, so let's talk about securing our home networks, because with so many devices online these days, it feels like our homes are becoming digital fortresses.
That's a good way to put it. And every fortress needs strong walls. So start by changing the default password on your router. That's one of the easiest ways to improve your security.
Okay. And a guest network. That's a good idea too, right?
Definitely. Use a guest network for visitors, so they don't have access to your main network. And obviously a strong Wi-Fi password, and make sure you're using a strong encryption protocol like WPA2 or WPA3.
Okay. Strong passwords, two-factor authentication, watching out for phishing scams, keeping our software updated, and securing our home networks. Anything else?
Think of it as layering your defenses. So on top of all those measures, use reputable antivirus and anti-malware software. They can help detect and remove malicious software.
So it's like having a security guard patrolling your digital perimeter.
Yeah.
A good analogy. And one last thing, and this is really important, backups. Back up your important files regularly, whether it's to an external hard drive or a cloud storage service. Because if you get hit with ransomware, or you have a hardware failure, or even if you just accidentally delete something important, those backups can be a lifesaver.
It's like an insurance policy for your data. You hope you never need to use it, but you're really glad you have it if you do.
Exactly.
And it's not just about protecting our personal data, right? I mean, businesses, they need to be just as vigilant when it comes to cybersecurity, if not more so.
Absolutely. Businesses of all sizes, they're potential targets. And the consequences of a data breach can be devastating. Financial losses, reputational damage, legal liabilities. It can really cripple a business.
So what are some key steps that businesses can take to, strengthen their cybersecurity posture? It all starts with understanding the risks. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, identify vulnerabilities, and prioritize those security efforts. From there, implement strong security controls, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, data loss prevention solutions.
It sounds overwhelming. I mean, where does a business even begin?
A great resource is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have a really good framework, a comprehensive set of guidelines for managing cybersecurity risks, and it's designed for organizations of all sizes.
Okay, so that's a good starting point. And I guess it's important to remember that technology is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
You need to have the right people and processes in place as well.
Absolutely. The human element is critical. Invest in security awareness training for all employees. Everyone needs to understand the importance of strong passwords, how to spot phishing scams, and what to do if they suspect a security incident.
So it's really about fostering that culture of security awareness.
Exactly. It has to be a top-down approach, from the CEO down to, the newest employee.
All right. We've covered a lot of ground here, from individual best practices to, the challenges facing businesses. As we move into our final thoughts, is there one key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. We all have a role to play in protecting ourselves and our data, and by staying informed, adopting good security practices, working together, that's how we create a safer digital world.
Well said. All right. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and wrap things up. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've covered a lot of ground. Those vulnerabilities, those exploits, a lot of practical tips for just shoring up our digital defenses. But it's a lot. I mean, cybersecurity, it's a constantly evolving landscape, right? It seems like every time you plug one hole, another one pops up.
It's true. The threat landscape is always changing. It's dynamic. But, instead of feeling overwhelmed, I think it's more helpful to look at it as a challenge, a puzzle to be solved. And the more we understand these threats, the better equipped we are to defend against them, right?
I like that. It's about staying curious, staying informed, not getting bogged down in fear and anxiety.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to shift our focus a little bit to the future. If you had to distill everything we've talked about down to, say, 3 key pieces of advice for navigating this cybersecurity landscape ahead, what would they be?
Okay. Well, first, be proactive. Don't wait for something bad to happen, a breach, an attack. Implement those basic security measures we talked about. Strong passwords, 2-factor authentication, keep your software updated. Those are the foundation of a strong security posture.
So it's like building a house. You can't have all the fancy bells and whistles if the foundation is crumbling.
A great analogy. Second, stay informed. Pay attention to what's happening in the cybersecurity world. Subscribe to security blogs. Follow those reputable security researchers on social media. Just stay up to date on the latest threats and vulnerabilities.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And that leads me to my third point. Be skeptical. Don't just blindly trust everything you see online. Question those emails. Scrutinize those too good to be true offers. Double-check those unfamiliar websites. And, if something just feels off, trust your gut.
Absolutely. Go with your gut. Be mindful. Be discerning in our digital interactions. And it's not just about protecting ourselves, right? I mean, we have a responsibility to help others, especially those who might be more vulnerable to these scams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can all play a role in spreading awareness, helping others stay safe online. Talk to your family and friends, Share what you've learned. Encourage them to take these security steps. We're all in this together.
They're like a neighborhood watch, but for the online world.
Yeah.
Okay, but before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. We've talked about current threats, current vulnerabilities, but what about the future? What emerging trends should we be keeping an eye on?
That's a great question. One trend that's already gaining a lot of momentum is the use of artificial intelligence. In cybersecurity, AI can be used to detect and respond to threats much more quickly and efficiently than humans can. It can analyze vast amounts of data, identify patterns and anomalies that might signal an attack, and it can even help us stay ahead of the curve by, predicting and preventing future attacks.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
But also a little bit scary, like a cyber arms race with AI battling AI.
Yeah. I mean, there's always a potential for misuse. But I really believe that AI can be a force for good in cybersecurity, and it can help level that playing field against these sophisticated attackers and ultimately create a more secure digital world.
Okay. But the human element is still going to be crucial.
Absolutely.
We need to make sure this technology is being used ethically and responsibly. Speaking of, really game-changing technologies, what about quantum computing? I know it's still early days, but it has the potential to completely revolutionize cybersecurity.
Absolutely. I mean, quantum computers have the power to break the encryption algorithms that we rely on today, and that could have huge implications for everything from online banking to national security.
Double-edged sword. So what can we do to prepare for this quantum future?
Well, the good news is researchers are already working on developing quantum-resistant algorithms. So it's important to stay informed about these developments and, be prepared to adapt our security practices as needed.
It seems like the one constant in cybersecurity is change.
Yeah.
A never-ending challenge.
Yeah.
But also, incredibly dynamic, incredibly fascinating field.
It is. It's a field that demands continuous learning and adaptation, but it's also very rewarding, Knowing that you're playing a role in protecting people and organizations, it's a good feeling.
Well said. And on that inspiring note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. It's been a pleasure as always.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Remember, stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there. Until next time, happy surfing.